Hello, in this lesson we are going to talk about the different parts of a parabola. If you recall, a parabola is just the graph of a quadratic function. It kind of look like a U or kind of like a hill. So on here we're going to label some parts that are important in parabolas. The first part is this blue point here. This is called a vertex. This is maybe the most important part of a parabola. It's either the highest or the lowest point, depending on which way the parabola opens. The next part is these two green dots right here. These are called zeros. These are also zeros, also known as your x-intercepts, where the graph crosses the x-axis. And then we have this purple line right here that cuts the parabola in half. This is just a line of symmetry. And then we also will later in this unit talk about the y-intercept right there. But for right now, we are going to just focus on these three main things. Okay, so let's take a look at each of these individually. We'll start with zeros. So a zero of a function is just the x value that makes the function equal to 0. That's why we call it a 0. And again, it's just an x-intercept because that is where y equals 0. So in this particular graph, that would be these 2 points right here. This one and this one right here. So what are those values? In this one, it would be -2, and the other one would be at 4. So those are my two zeros. So when you're asked to find a 0, if you have a graph, it's pretty easy. So let's just take a look. On your assignment, you'll see something like this. Now with quadratic functions, sometimes you'll have 2 zeros, sometimes you'll have 1, and sometimes you won't even have any. So let's just look at this first graph on the left here. So the 2 zeros are where they cross the x-axis. So there are 2 of them. This one looks like it's at -1 and at 3. When you write your zeros, if there's 2, don't do this. Okay? You don't want to do that because that really means -1, 3 is actually this point right here. We don't want to say that. What we're trying to say is there are 2 different ones here, so don't do that. Okay? This middle one, you can see this dot right here crosses the x-axis right there, and that's at -4. And then this last one, this last graph on the right, you can see that it does not cross the x-axis at all. It crosses the y-axis, but not the x-axis. So this one here, we would just write none. Okay? And that's all you got to do to find the zeros if you have a graph. Okay. The line of symmetry, we said, is a line that cuts a shape into 2 symmetrical halves. You guys are probably familiar with that line of symmetry with different shapes already. So like if you have a square, you can cut it here so that it looks the same on both sides. This way, you could do diagonals. If I drew that better, that would make more sense, but you get the picture. So line of symmetry for a parabola, there's only one, whereas a square, they have a bunch, and the line of symmetry in this parabola is right down the middle. It will pass through the vertex. Now remember, the vertex is right here, so it's going to pass through that all the time. So you'll be asked on your assignment to make sure that you draw it, sketch it like I just did there in purple, and then you're also going to write the equation. Remember vertical lines, this purple line is a vertical line. Vertical lines, the equation is always x equals some number, and you just want to see where that would pass through. So you'll notice here it's going through. That right there is, oops, a little bit off there. That right there is 1. So the equation for line is simply x equals 1. Okay? And again, I wrote it here at the bottom. For parabolas, the line of symmetry always will pass through the vertex. So you want to find the vertex and then just kind of cut that in half. Okay, so on your assignment, it'll look kind of like this. It'll say sketch the line of symmetry for each quadratic function and then write its equation. So I'm going to zoom into this one. So what we'd want to do here is draw a line that passes through the middle of this. It should go through that vertex there. And there's my line. And now I want to write the equation. And make sure you have x equals, because it's got to be a vertical line. In order for it to be a vertical line, you've got to put that x equals. So x equals what? Where does that hit the x-axis there? It hits at -1. Okay? So that's it. So let's just try this a couple times here. So on this one, I'm going to draw right through the middle, through the vertex. And notice this one here, let's see, is at 1, 2, it's in between 2 and 3. It's halfway in between 2 and 3. So that's 2.5. So x equals 2.5. And that's all you're going to do on each of these. Sometimes it's easier than others. Just make sure you find the vertex and draw a line right through the middle of the parabola. Goes through the vertex. If you did that, you're good to go. So this one here would be x equals -3. And then lastly here, there we go. Draw your line. And this one would be x equals 1 as well. All right, and that's it. Make sure you do both parts, sketch the graph, and write the equation. All right, so we said the vertex is maybe the most important point. The vertex is really your highest point or your lowest point on the parabola, on the graph. So this is also called the turning point. So on this graph, we see here, that is the vertex right there, okay? That would be the highest point. Over here on this one, this is the vertex as well. That's the lowest point. Okay, so related to the vertex is the maximum or minimum values. And this is just how high the graph goes or how low the graph goes, okay? So basically what controls height of something on the graph, that's your y value. So when we're looking at that, we're thinking the y value of the vertex. So in this case, because this point right here, the vertex right there is our highest point, this would be a maximum. Okay, and then what would that maximum be? It would go up to 5. Okay, and if the vertex is the lowest point, like this one, we call it a minimum. And how low does this one go? It goes, you're going to look over at the y value, it looks like it's at 1. Okay, so that's how you determine if it's a max or min and what the value is. Okay, so now let's just try this. This is what your directions will look like on your assignment. It'll say identify the vertex of each parabola. You're going to just write an ordered pair. Decide if it is a maximum or a minimum, and you're just going to circle that, and then state what that value is. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit here on this one. So vertex, the vertex is this point right there. So you're just going to write the coordinates of that as an ordered pair. So you always do x first, so this should be -3, and then comma 2. Okay, so then second part of this says, is this a maximum or a minimum? You're going to just circle one of these. So this point that I have an arrow here, that vertex right now, is that the highest point or the lowest point? It's the lowest point, so this is a minimum. Okay, and then the max or min value, this is the minimum value. And what is the minimum value? You're just going to look here at the y value. It should be the y value of your vertex, or how low this goes. So this is 2. Okay, and that's all. All right, so let's just make sure that this makes sense and try this again on this one. Okay. All right, so our vertex is this point right here, and that is at 2, 5. That point is our highest point on the graph, so that is a maximum. So this is a maximum value, and how high does that get? Again, you can look at your vertex and look right here if you want, or you can look at the graph, how high it goes. It should be right there. So the maximum value then is 5. That's it. And so that's everything you need to know about vertex, a line of symmetry, and zeros for now. All right, see you later.